Hey guys, it's Colin here. One of the biggest obstacles for a younger person like me to try to get into this hobby full throttle like everyone wants to be when you start is obviously a big one is parents. And in this episode I'm going to talk about how to get your parents to let you get animals. Welcome to Classy Herps. Okay, so I definitely couldn't have chosen a better time to make this video because I just got a few new animals, ones that most people's parents don't let them get. It's even worse than snakes sometimes. I actually just got my first tarantula here. You can see it's coming up the glass. I'm gonna try to go through the glass. It's a little Chilean rose-haired tarantula. I don't have a name for it. I'm going to put this up for YouTube to decide. You guys can choose. What should this guy's name be? I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl. It doesn't really matter or anything. I don't really care. But yeah, just give me some name options and I'll announce to the winner is with the best name. Okay, I also got some little emperor scorpions, as you can see here. I'm not gonna hold it because they're a little grumpy still. But you can see I got one here and there's also another one under that little hide there. Alright, and then I also got this little Kenyan sandboa. It's a male. It's a snow type. He's gonna be a breeder for me soon. I'm gonna get a female snow. You see he's just on paper towel right now. It's a precaution for all my animals. Prevent mites. He will be on Aspen soon. I'm definitely going to get into Kenyan sandboas because I think they're going to be a big hit here pretty soon. I love this little guy. His name is Ben, by the way. Alright, now of course you're wondering, wow, how lucky am I to have parents that let me get animals like this, because I know I am very lucky. My parents, believe it or not, were also, just like everyone else, is extremely against them to start with. Even snakes and the frogs were also, they didn't want it. But you gotta remember that most people don't think of reptiles as pets. The average pet in someone's mind is like a dog or a cat or a hamster maybe. It's such an alien thing for most people to think about owning one of these things. So just keep in mind about that. Even though you don't think it's so much anymore, you've done your research, in their mind it still is absolutely crazy. Okay, so now you're wondering, okay, so your parents were against them too, then how did you possibly convince them to let you get all these animals? Well, there's a few steps that I figured out just for experience. Number one, way above all things, is definitely do your research and know your stuff about the animals. More than anything ever will impress your parents and persuade them to let you get an animal is if they know that you know how to take care of the animal, because as I mentioned before, it's such an alien thing. This is one area in your parents' vast area of knowledge that they don't know much about. So they don't know what to do, and they most likely don't want to deal with these animals at all if they don't have to. So if they know that you know how to take care of them, they're probably not going to mind as much knowing that they won't have to mess with them. Also, just knowing things and talking about them and throwing out facts about them will just kind of impress them and more persuade them that you know what you're doing, and that will help you out. Okay, so to review, know your stuff. Know what kind of caging your animal needs, the heat requirements, the hide requirements, the water requirements, substrate. Know your stuff. That is number one. Alright, now let's say you've done your research and you know your stuff, and they still don't want to. You keep trying to talk to them about it, but they just ignore you and they don't want to talk about it. So one thing I figured out, what I did was write a paper or a report about the animal, because they can ignore you in person while you're talking. Alright, and so they get annoyed with you talking about it so much, because I know it's really easy to talk about them so much. And so what I did was write a report, like a paper, just facts and facts about the animal, because they can't argue with a piece of paper at least, so they can't argue with that, and they just kind of have to read it, and they probably will, and leave it somewhere where they'll find it alone, and that you won't be there for them to talk about it. Just let them read it. I think that reading kind of helps a person digest what you're really talking about more than just what the person themselves is saying, if that makes any sense. Okay, next step is definitely be reasonable. A big thing some people might do is just want to jump into it too quick and ask for a giant animal. This is a perfect example. You can see this little tiny Kenyan sandboa is a perfect starter. A ball python is also, but I mean, Kenyans are even smaller. No sane person can be afraid of this little thing. I also find that albino animals can help someone get over their fear, because when people think of scary snakes, they think of the normal colored ones. This white and albino colored just kind of blows that all out of the water, and it's just not scary. So remember, asking for a boa constrictor for your first snake is not a good option because they do get big. Ask for something like this, or a ball python maybe, because they are definitely much more reasonable. And also another big thing is, let's all face it, these are expensive. Okay, the tank a lot of times, or the setup, usually costs more than the animal. That's big. You can see, this is my Emperor Scorpion's cage that I just made. You need all the substrate, you need a water bowl, logs, some hides, some plants, make it look pretty. The bulb, the dome, the heating pad underneath, it costs quite a bit. So be sure that you can afford it. You know, be reasonable when you're going through and picking your stuff out, because it can add up pretty quick. I'm going to point out again, remember, a tub is going to be a lot cheaper than a tank if you ever want to go down that road again. All you got in here is substrate, a water bowl, and a hide, and heat on the back. No decorations, that's left out because they're unnecessary. Now another thing is that once you get into this reptile hobby, things just start happening, you know what's going on. You just want to dive right into it and get breeding and have your own stuff. Just take a breath and start off a little bit slower. Definitely get off a normal first. Is your first one. Get a normal. This is a normal ball python here. Get a normal first and see how you like it, because normals are cheap. If it turns out that ball pythons, they just aren't for you, then you didn't waste a lot of money in buying an expensive morph. But if it does happen that you really enjoy the animals and you think you're going to get further into it, then you can start buying morphs, because let me tell you, morphs, they aren't cheap. The cheapest one would be a pastel. Pastel male is $100 and they go up from there pretty quick. Most of mine are about the $300, $400 range. And then again, you can always get these little normals for free in pet stores. When there's a big abundance of babies, you can get them for free. Okay, and something I realized happened with my parents also is when someone gets their first snake, it's really scary because it's a snake. Everyone who hasn't ever owned one before always has the bad impression that they're these horrible animals that are just going to desire in the world is to kill and eat everything, including you. And that's definitely not true, but most people just can't understand that without actually experiencing it. So after you get your first one as a pet, it kind of comes through that these things aren't so bad. And then most everyone will begin to warm up to them. Maybe they won't want to hold them actually or really get into it, but they'll begin to accept what they are and that they're not horrible creatures. See, Scott's trying to go into his hide up there.
I never really imagined that I'd have 10 snakes in my house. And a year ago, I would have never imagined I'd have 1 snake in my house. But now that the boys have had me around them, I'm okay with it. I've never held them, I've touched them, but I can sleep at night. And even when one escaped, it didn't bother me too bad because they're so little. So if you're really hesitant to let your kid bring a snake home, go to the pet store with him once or twice and watch him hold the snake. And after a while, you'll get comfortable with it.
So that was actually my mom giving her take on all of this. She just wanted to say, just keep trying. Don't be a pest about it, but be persistent, because they'll want to definitely put it off and not talk about it. But if you keep bringing it up over and over without being annoying, it'll eventually warm up to them. They might begin to accept it. She also did bring out another big point. Taking your mom to the pet store, if whatever it is. We went a lot because we had to get fish for her aquarium because she liked fish, and I would always go over and check out the ball pythons and the lizards and everything. I eventually got her over there to watch me hold them while we were there, and I don't know how many visits it took before she finally came around and let me bring my first one home, but it did happen, so it's not completely beyond reason. If you want to, you can have your parent watch this video, and you can see this is a snake. This is what it lives in. It's just a little paper towel in a tub. It lives perfectly happy in there. This is a little baby Kenyan sand boa. Not exactly a baby, but not an adult by any means. It's not going to get much bigger than this though. Maybe 2 foot at the max because it's a male. You can see it's extremely tame. It's not trying to bite me as you would probably imagine a snake doing, because they're really tame. You can see just got a little head, and that obviously couldn't do much damage to you. He doesn't really care about much. He'll let me touch him and do whatever I want, and he's really laid back, and you wouldn't imagine that, but it is true.
It's time for the weekly comment contest.
This week we talked about how we convinced our parents to let us get reptiles. We want to know, how did you convince your parents to get reptiles / amphib Please leave your comments down below for a shout out next Monday. Last week's comment contest question, which was what was the craziest day that you've ever had, was best answered by X-Ray1 and Box, who said, a day that I hung out the night before and woke up naked. Yeah, that's happened to me a couple of times. Don't want to talk about it. We'll see you guys next week. Bye. Let's do a filter cut.